Good evening. Buonasera a tutti, and welcome to ROM. My name is Maria Piacente, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Exhibition and Gallery Planning. And I'm delighted you can join us for tonight's program. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that ROM sits on the ancestral lands of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabe Nation, which includes the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation from time immemorial to today. This program is co-presented by ROM and the Consulate General of Italy and the Istituto Italiano di Cultura di Toronto. And I would like to thank them for their support and partnership throughout the development of tonight's program. ROM has a long-standing relationship with the Consul General of Italy, and I would like to acknowledge and thank the Consul General Dr. Luca Zelioli for his continued support of museum initiatives. I look forward. Thank you. Yes. I look forward to our future collaborations with them, and I would also like to personally thank Veronica Manson, Director of the Istituto Italiano di Cultura di Toronto, who will serve as MC for tonight's program, and Minister Paul Calandra, who is joining us tonight as well. Thank you. Before we begin, please kindly turn your phones and other devices to silent so that we can truly enjoy this wonderful program that we're about to experience. This evening's program will feature an illustrated talk by Olga Zorzi-Pugliese, Professor Emerita in the Department of Italian Studies at the University of Toronto, followed by a light reception under the stunning mosaic that is the subject and inspiration for tonight's talk. I want personally to thank Dr. Pugliese and our friends at the Consulate for proposing this talk. The rotunda ceiling is the centerpiece of ROM's western entrance and one of the absolute treasures of the institution, and indeed the province. I hope each of you in the audience talks tonight feeling as inspired and awed by this magnificent work of art as we do here every day at ROM. Thank you all for spending a Sunday evening with us. And I would like to now welcome Veronica Manson.
Thank you, Maria Piacente. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be here tonight. My name is Veronica Manson. I'm the director of the Istituto Italiano di Cultura, and I'm really honored to be your MC tonight. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Paul Calandra, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Mr. Calandra, please.
So, thank you very much, and I'll be deliberately brief because I know nobody wants to hear me. Consul General and Professor, thank you very much for bringing this to us. I have to tell you, when the Consul General told me about this, has to be maybe 6 weeks ago, I was actually quite surprised. I thought I had been through the museum so many times, and it took the Consul General of Italy to tell me about the extraordinary mosaic, and I felt somewhat embarrassed that I hadn't taken the time myself to learn more about it. That's why I have been so excited about this this event for a long period of time. It's very interesting. My dad, my parents were immigrants, obviously. My dad said to me, he said, Canada opened its door to the Italian people, but they didn't always welcome the Italian people, despite the door being open to them. And one of the things he said to me was, that's okay, because sometimes you have to earn that welcome. And I like to think that Italians over and over and over and over and over again earn that welcome each and every day. The older I get, the more nostalgic. I was telling to the Consul General, the older I get, the more nostalgic I get about being an Italian kid, first generation born here. And all of the things that you thought were difficulties when you were growing up, you now crave and miss. You know, the Italians didn't just give us roads and buildings and bridges. They gave us art and beauty. They gave us Pavarotti. They gave us so many things. But when I was growing up as a kid, some of you, those that are Italian, you know, you worked really hard, right? You planted and you harvested so that you always had. We weren't rich, but we lived like we were rich because we worked very hard. you know, with tomatoes in August, the wine in October. Hated doing both of those things, but now I would give anything to be able to do those and pass it on to my kids. The hours spent peeling peas so that we could freeze them, harvesting pears, and all of the work that we did, so that although we didn't have a lot, we didn't live like we didn't have a lot. My mother could turn one chicken breast into 5 veal cutlets, or chicken cutlets. I don't know how the heck she did it, but it is a skill I'm learning right now as prices get more and more expensive. But as I said, the older I get, the more nostalgic I get for what was a wonderful, wonderful period where you were always together. I was with an uncle of mine just the other day, and he said, "It's not the same, you guys are just so busy now. It's hard to get together as often as you did." And then I thought to myself, my dad worked literally 7 days a week, but he still always had time to bring the family together, and the pictures show that. People like a former member of Parliament, Joe Volpe, who is here, these are the people that broke down the barriers for us and allowed my generation to be able to not only succeed in ways that they hadn't, to have been an Italian kid who was a parliamentary secretary to a prime minister and now a cabinet member of the Ontario government, is built on the backs of people who came here before me and worked really, really hard. And that is what makes this so exciting, because it's not just the hard infrastructure that you go on, it is the beauty of Italy brought here. And Professor, thank you so much. I think we have to do a heck of a lot better than I say. I take it upon ourselves as government to do a better job of helping people better understand the extraordinary beauty that the Italian people brought to the province of Ontario. So thank you so much for having me. I really, really look forward to this. And thank you so much, Consul General, for opening my eyes to what was above my head the million times I walked through this place. I'm really looking forward to it. So thanks for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Calandra. I would like now to call to the podium Consul General of Italy, Luca Zeglioli, for his opening remarks.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Calandra, Senior Vice President Piacente, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to this event organized by the Consulate General of Italy, the Royal Ontario Museum, of course, and the Italian Cultural Institute. But thanks to, and this I want to highlight, the financial support of the Canadian-Italian Business and Professional Association, the chapter of Toronto, the Italian-Canadian Savings, Masters Insurance, MAPEI, Villa Charities, and Famè Furlani. Of course, I am very grateful to Provincial Minister Paul Calandra for his participation and his kind words. He has already focused on several points I'm going to highlight as well. June is the Italian Heritage Month in Canada, and there cannot be a more pertinent initiative than this one, I believe, for the Italian-Canadian community to celebrate its heritage. Italians did contribute in changing this country, and in particular this province, under many respects. Some have already been quoted: the wine culture and industry, the food scene, but also legislation on safety at work, and modalities of integrating migrants coming to Canada. And perhaps everyone here remember what still is COSTI, a very important organization to this effect, that was created by Italians. The first wave of our migrants came to Canada during the second half of the 19th century. We can truly speak, therefore, about a history of Italian influence and cultural memories. And in my first 2 years in Toronto, I discovered, in fact, various of those memories, like the almost forgotten Roman column in front of City Hall here in Toronto, donated by Rome in the 50s, or the eclectic fountain sculpture by Alfio Bartorelli in Etobicoke, the monument to multiculturalism just at the Union Station by Francesco Pirelli. And I also witnessed the addition of modern contribution, and one for all, the new Ontarian Courthouse signed by Renzo Piano. So many are these cultural contributions that with Corrado Paina, the long-standing director of our Chamber of Commerce, we plan to present them in a publication or video under the title An Italian Itinerary in Toronto. Without Corrado, who sadly recently passed away, I'm not sure that this ambitious project can be completed. But tonight's event was anyway conceived as its first step, aiming at reviving one of the most ancient among those memories, the splendid mosaic in the rotunda of this museum, created by artisans from Friuli Venezia Giulia in 1933. Professor Emerita Olga Pugliese Zorzi, a renowned scholar whom I have to thank for having been instrumental in inspiring this initiative, will lecture us in a few moments about these wonderful mosaics. While giving back this memory to the Italian Canadian community, I also hope that this event can help Torontonians in rediscovering buildings like this one, whose historical value is to be cherished. Remembering also its multicultural enrichment, in this case thanks to Italian migrants. And many descendants of those Friulani artisan creators of the mosaic are with us tonight, some even coming from the United States. So this soiree is a tribute to your ancestors' skills, and the wonderful heritage they left to everyone to enjoy. Thank you for being with us, and happy Italian Heritage Month to all.
Thank you, Consul General Zelioni. Now, a few words about our lecturer tonight. Professor Olga Zorzi Pugliese. During her 45-year career at the University of Toronto, she is a professor emerita and served as a chair of the Department of Italian Studies between 1997 and 2002. While director of the Center of Renaissance and Reformation Studies at Victoria University, she was also the president of the Canadian Society for Italian Studies and co-organized the first annual conference of the association to be held in Trieste, Italy. Her scholarly work has focused on Renaissance literature and includes studies on Baldassare Castiglione, Niccolò Machiavelli, and other figures. For several decades, she has been researching and publishing on Italian Canadian studies too, especially on mosaic artwork in Canada by Italian Canadian artists and craftsmen. Together with her late husband Guido, she has also promoted Italian culture by endowing scholarships in perpetuity for study in Italy. These scholarships have been established at various institutions: Victoria College at the University of Toronto, the University of Toronto Mississauga, and Western University. So I would like to please welcome Professor Zorzi Pugliese. I would like to remind you that after the presentation, there will be the opportunity to have a Q&A with Professor Pugliese right after. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Manson, for your kind words. I'd also like to thank those who've helped organize tonight's event, Dr. Basichus, director of the ROM, and all his staff, including the archivist, all of whom have supported the project. Dr. Zelioli, as you already heard, the Consul General of Italy, who welcomed and embraced the project enthusiastically. And I also want to thank Luisa Giacometti, who brought us together and actually allowed it to take place. I'm grateful too to Gemma Zecchini for her technical help and for being here ready to step in should I falter. I hope not, but one never knows. This is a perfect venue in multicultural Canada to be discussing world culture. The ROM, founded in 1912, is known as an encyclopedic museum because of its vast holdings. The mosaic vaulted ceiling at the entrance, the subject of tonight's talk, expresses, as one writer aptly put it, unity in diversity. Of the many cultures that the ROM Mosaic reflects, Italian culture has a particular place, not only in the overall design of the work and in some of its details, but also because it is the product of skilled artisans, originally from Italy, who executed the work and brought it to life in a Toronto workshop. My research on the mosaic and its creators began some 25 years ago and was first published in an article 5 years later. But some of those earlier findings have now been revised and updated. I'd like first to review what is generally known about the mosaic. By February 1929, plans had been approved for a new wing to be added to the museum. Construction began in early September 1930 and was part of the Make Work effort in Ontario during the Depression. The new wing was designed in the Beaux-Arts classical style of the day by the architectural engineering team of Chapman and Oxley. A major embellishment was the mosaic on the vaulted ceiling of the rotunda at the new eastern entrance. It represented the earliest large-scale mosaic produced in Canada by a Canadian, not American company. The mosaic is generally believed to have been the idea of the first curator of the ROM and one of its founders, Dr. Charles Trick Curley, a University of Toronto archaeologist. But no single person, not even Curley, ever claimed authorship of the design. Evidence would suggest that it was devised by the architect Alfred Chapman, who had attended the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris for 2 years. Nevertheless, some modifications to the original design were introduced, possibly with input by others, even by the craftsmen who executed it. For example, the biblical motto inscribed at the center of the mosaic was a collaborative effort. As one archival document indicates, it was selected by the architects and the museum committee. The company to whom the architectural firm awarded the contract to execute the mosaic was the Connolly Marble Mosaic and Tile Company, then located at 235 College Street. Among the documents about the mosaic found in the ROM archive, there are 2 typewritten sheets issued by the Connolly Company. One, dated the 29th of June 1932, concerns the delays that had occurred, and another, undated but clearly from 1933, offers an overview of the work after its completion. These are 2 fundamental sources from which all data have derived, even if some details have not always been reported accurately on the Canadian, specifically Toronto, location of its creation, for instance. The basic chronology for the construction of the mosaic was as follows. The designs and full-size cartoons were ready by the spring of 1932. The materials, all premier quality vitreous smalti, described as the same as used in the early mosaics of famous old buildings in Italy, were ordered probably from a supplier in Venice. After some delay, they were shipped from Genova and arrived in Toronto by way of US ports and then overland by train on the first days of July 1932. The unavoidable delay in the shipment from Italy, as the Connolly contractor explained to the architects, was due to changes of designs and color scheme necessitated by final gold background. The manufacturer in Italy had taken an extra 6 weeks to prepare the large quantity of gold smalti now required. The contractor reassured the architects, though, that once the materials arrived, work would be sped up. "Everything is ready," he wrote, including all colored full-size details, working drawings, a thoroughly organized plan, and ample number of mosaic workers required. A person I interviewed in the 1990s who had taken part in the installation of the work stated that there were 3 or 4 mosaicists working on it in the shop. Their names were never specified, of course. When the work was completed, Connolly explained that the ROM Mosaic had required approximately 4,000 sheets in size approximately 12 inches by 18 inches and had been cut, mounted, and glue pasted on paper in our shop by our own Italian craftsmen, taking approximately 6 months to do so and another 2 months to prepare and erect on the job. If, as Connolly indicated, it took a total of 8 months to execute in the shop and install on location, the mosaic must have been in place by March 1933, and the new wing was officially opened in October of the same year. Now, what does the work represent? The general design of the mosaic, with brightly colored figures standing out against the glittering gold tesserae filling the background, is reminiscent of the Byzantine tradition of artwork found in cities like Venice. And here we see the Basilica of St. Mark, called the Golden Basilica of Venice, and a detail of the figures of Christ and St. Mark in the 13th century lunette above one entrance. The Connolly Company prided itself on being able to provide special Venetian mosaics, as the letterhead from the summer of 1932 announces. By contrast, many of the famous early Christian mosaics in Ravenna that you might be familiar with often have a darker, for example, blue background, which in the 1960s inspired artist Luigi Nasato, who designed the mosaics in St. Anne's Anglican Church, which tragically went up in flames here in Toronto just 2 weeks ago. Byzantine mosaics of the Venetian type, with golden backgrounds suggesting divinity, were mainly dedicated to religious subjects like the Last Supper. It's true that in the ROM Mosaic, the inscription at the center is taken from the Bible, but the message of the mosaic is clearly a secular one. The original description of the mosaic and explanation of the central thematic content, especially the individual symbols, was provided by the Connolly Company on the document viewed earlier, dating from the time of completion. The title reads, "Historical and Architectural Details of 12 Colored Panels Representing the 4 Main Branches of Historical Art Development." And each of the 4 sections consists of 3 panels. They're listed as follows. In the first group, the native cultures of North and South America, the buffalo, Inca god of thunder, and North American eagle. In the second group, Western civilization from the early periods, the Egyptian falcon or vulture, Greek seahorse, and Roman she-wolf. The third group features what are labeled as Asiatic, the Persian winged bull, white elephant of India, and Chinese dragon. Finally, the fourth group represents the medieval development from the Byzantine, the Lion of St. Mark, Moorish Fountain of the Lions, and heraldic griffin. Comprehensive in both temporal and spatial terms, the symbolic panels, as the document states, trace the historical development of art from man's earliest attempts at artistic expression to the medieval or Gothic period. And note that it goes no further in time. Nothing from the Renaissance or more modern periods is covered. Art is seen to have reached its pinnacle in the medieval Byzantine tradition, precisely the one that the ROM Mosaic was designed to reflect. Now, this is where the official story ends, but it does not address the question of who executed the work. The identities of the expert Italian craftsmen mentioned by Connolly, who created it in the College Street workshop. The chapter I've added to the story of the ROM Mosaic is based on information gathered when colleague Angelo Principe and I were researching one segment of the local Italian community and the founding of its regional association in Toronto in the early 1930s. The Italian region in question is Friuli Venezia Giulia, and the local association of persons from this region in Toronto is the Famiglie Furlane, one of tonight's sponsors. As research was to show, the artisans involved in the ROM Mosaic, who will be introduced later one by one, were from Friuli. Some were also closely involved with the association. Of the 20 regions that make up the Italian peninsula, Friuli occupies the northeast corner. Venice, in the neighboring region of the Veneto, is located to the southwest. The Friuli region has a centuries-old tradition of terrazzo making and mosaics. Why? These skills are believed to have developed in the hilly central area of the region because of the ubiquitous presence of stones in the earth and river beds of the area. It's a theory explained in a study titled Dal Sasso al Mosaico, that is, from stones to mosaic. I suppose if the land was not fertile, the stones could be utilized with some ingenuity. Friuli has a long history of emigration too. The men who left in the 19th and early 20th centuries brought their skills with them to other countries in Europe and to the Americas. A cooperative program offering training in terrazzo and mosaics had existed in the town of Sequals, famous as the birthplace of the gigantic boxer Primo Pernera that some of you, not the young ones, may have heard of. In 1922, an official school for mosaicists was established, not in Sequals, but in the better equipped nearby town of Spilimbergo, with the help and funding of mosaicists from the area who had made their fortune in America. This is the background of the protagonists involved in the creation of the ROM Mosaic. They were all from Friuli and all employees of the Connolly Company. And the following are the human faces to be attached to the previous factual account. The owner and president of the company, which won the contract for the ROM Mosaic, was Joseph Connolly, who had arrived in Toronto from Ireland in 1905. As the city directories show, before establishing his own company, he had gained experience in the field, having served as manager of the Italian Mosaic and Marble Company and as vice president of the ROM Mosaic and Tile Company, both owned and run by Friulians. These successful partnerships brought together skilled Italian marble and mosaic workers and one Anglophone familiar with the Canadian world of business. Connolly's own company was formed with 2 partners from Friuli and was first listed in the Toronto Directory in 1930. Connolly had a keen interest in the arts and literature and must have been eager to carry out works of architectural beauty like the vaulted ceiling in the ROM. A few years later, in 1936, his company also produced the lavish mosaic decorations of the Thomas Foster Memorial in Uxbridge, Ontario, a site that not very many people are familiar with, unfortunately. A photograph found in the National Archives of Canada records an exhibit of the Connolly Company at the Canadian National Exhibition in Toronto in the early 30s. The display items include a number of panels from the ROM Mosaic. At the bottom, from the medieval and Byzantine group, the Lion of St. Mark, shown also in reverse, reflecting the technique used. At the top is a drawing for the 3 images representing Western civilization in the early periods: the Egyptian falcon, the seahorse symbolizing Greek culture, and the Roman she-wolf. A comparison between the drawing on display and the completed details in the ROM Mosaic highlights how the mosaic artisans brought the sketches to life. The sign for the Connolly display at the CNE reads as follows: "These are some of the motif panels for the new Royal Ontario Museum. This mosaic work has been entirely executed in Toronto by skilled Italian craftsmen in complete cooperation with the architect and designer." When Joseph Connolly died, the title of his obituary, published in the newspaper, read, "Joseph Connolly dies in Scarborough, well known as constructor of mosaics in Royal Ontario Museum." His widow continued to run the company for a few years, but then sold it to Connolly Associates, as we'll see. Antonio Bortuzzo, seen in a photo taken before he left for North America, was from the town of Stilimbergo. He was a Connolly partner for a brief period only, from 1930 to 1932. But then, with regret, he returned permanently to Italy, since his wife, still back home in the town, did not wish to emigrate. Bortuzzo was known as Double Tony because of his capacity to do the work of 2 men. From reports received recently from a grandson in Italy who remembers him well, Bortuzzo was an expert in marble and terrazzo, less so in mosaic. Nevertheless, given that he was one of 2 Connolly partners during the early planning of the ROM Mosaic, he probably played some role in its creation. Connolly's other partner in the 1930s, in this case for 9 years, was Ciro Mora. As indisputable evidence proves, Mora was the principal mosaicist for both the ROM Mosaic and the Foster Memorial in Uxbridge. He has remained in obscurity in spite of the fact that articles of the day that appeared in both the local English and Italian language press did report on his achievements. a 1929 piece from the Toronto Daily Star, drawn to my attention by friend Paula Breda, announces the arrival in Toronto of Ciro Mora, and I quote, "Possibly the only man today in the Dominion of Canada capable of reproducing the ancient Roman mosaic work in all its original beauty." It's stated that he hailed from Venice because that's what Friulians even today often say. But that's because Friuli is not well known. But he was actually from the town of Sequas, the center for mosaics mentioned earlier. And it's here that he must have received the extensive 4-year training and long apprenticeship required as described by the Daily Star journalist. When he left Europe for North America as a single man in 1912, Mora had headed to the US, where he joined an older brother, also a mosaicist, in Washington. Both worked for their brother-in-law, also from Sequas, who was a successful entrepreneur, president of the National Mosaic Company of Washington, which was responsible for mosaics in the Capitol building, for example. By now a mosaicist with considerable North American experience, Ciro Mora moved to Canada in 1926. In Toronto, he worked for the Italian Mosaic and Tile Company before joining Connolly. He's listed as a partner in the Connolly firm in 1930, the year of its first operations, right up to 1939. The same 1929 article in the Star also identifies Ciro Mora as the mosaicist who was about to execute the work in the entrance to the Concourse building, now called EY Tower on Adelaide Street. It's a ceramic tile, not vitreous mosaic, recessed under the 2-story rounded doorway. It was designed in 1928 by a group of 7 artists, James E.H. MacDonald. That Ciro Mora should have been chosen to execute the Canadian artist's design is indicative of his stature and probably his new partner Connolly's connections. In an article in today's Star, the Concourse mosaic is among works of art featured, but naturally there's no mention of Mora. And naturally, I immediately fired off a letter of protest to the editor. The earlier and forgotten April 1929 article also reported that Ciro Mora was dealing with the ROM Museum. Note that this is just a short time after plans for the extension of the museum had been approved. The newspaper reporter quotes him directly as stating, and these are Ciro Mora's words, "On the 5th floor of your Royal Ontario Museum, there's a design for a figure of Moses to be carried out in mosaic work, and that design is by a master hand." End of quotation. It's not been possible to identify the work he was referring to, but what it does prove is that Mora was in close touch with the museum early on, several years before the vaulted ceiling was to be constructed. Could he have been a consultant? Was it he who convinced the architect-designer to opt for a gold backdrop, which required more gold smalti to be imported? It's certainly in the realm of possibilities. Proof that Ciro Mora eventually directed the work on the ROM Mosaic is found in the documentation available for the other major mosaic project by the Connolly Company in the extravagant Foster Memorial. And here's a photo of the 2 partners together at the inauguration of what was called Foster's Folly, given the extravagance of the Uxbridge Temple. A Toronto Italian language newspaper article from November 1936 announces the completion of the Byzantine structure in Uxbridge. It names Ciro Mora as the expert mosaicist responsible for the mosaics there and elsewhere too, including the ROM Mosaic. In 1950, when he was 60 years old, Ciro Mora returned to his hometown permanently, as his wife had done previously, in order to care for elderly parents. He died in Siquas 10 years later in 1960, leaving no descendants. His is not a household name, but as the newspaper reports of the day have documented, he was indeed the lead mosaicist responsible for the ROM Mosaic and at least 2 other major mosaic masterpieces in our area. Ciro Mora left behind no children to boast about the role their father had played in creating the ROM Mosaic, but the next 2 craftsmen I'm introducing instead did. First of all, Antonio dell'Angela, of the same generation as Mora and recipient of an award in the Friulian city of Udine in 1911 for his achievements in Venetian-style mosaic art. He had been called to North America by a Friulian entrepreneur to work in both the US and Canada. In Toronto, he was responsible for the mosaic lunette on the facade of Blessed Sacrament Church on Yonge Street, for example. The photograph you see features dell'Angela, the older, authoritative-looking figure in the foreground, with a group of persons inside the Foster Memorial when the interior of the structure was very near completion in 1936. Now, it was mosaicist's daughter, Elsa dell'Angela Bratti, who identified him and the others for me in the photo and explained the context. It was a festive occasion that she too had attended as a young woman. Although men only appear in the photo, the women and children were outside preparing the picnic. An article that appeared in an Italian language newspaper on the 14th of August 1936 states that Antonio dell'Angela, perhaps acting as a Connolly Company spokesperson, reported that a picnic had been held in Uxbridge on the previous Sunday to celebrate the completion of the work on the Foster Memorial. The Venetian-style mosaic, it stated, had been completed in 3 months by Italian artists of the Connolly Company under the direction of Ciro Mora. The event for the workers and their families was probably sponsored by Foster himself, a former Toronto mayor who left a legacy of philanthropy that continues to this day. But anyone familiar with old Friulian customs might recognize the social event as what in Friulian is called a likov, a picnic or toast offered by the owner when a building is near completion. The next craftsman was discovered when members of the Italian community being interviewed spoke of the excitement that had existed among Friulians in particular over the contribution that their compatriots had made to the ROM Mosaic. And they directed me to the family of Marino Colonello, a Spilimbergo-trained mosaicist of a younger generation than Mora and dell'Angela. He arrived in Canada in 1926, and as we shall see, certainly left his mark. Daughter Marina Colonello Pezzetta explained how her father had proudly taken his family to the museum to see the glittering masterpiece to which he had contributed. Moreover, he confided that he had inserted some personal touches in it. Indeed, many of his works bear his initials. In this photo, we see him displaying the initial maquette of a detail of a work he was preparing for a convent. I was also able to verify that Marino Colonello's initials are found in the mosaic terrazzo floor of the 1951 new City Hall in Peterborough, Ontario. It's a flooring that depicts a map of the district surrounding the city, and the initials are there. Let's not forget that the sculptors who worked on Toronto Old City Hall put known faces in the gargoyles, I suppose the faces, not those of their friends. And in St. Anne's Anglican, a group of 7 artists painted his own facial features in a figure in one of the religious scenes, now lost in the recent fire. Now, is there evidence of anything comparable in the ROM Mosaic? Let's go back to one of the 12 panels, namely the depiction of the Lion of St. Mark with the slanted letters M-A-R, leaving aside the official biblical inscription at the center of the vaulted ceiling. This is the only place on the whole mosaic where we find lettering. M-A-R is the first syllable of the name Marcus, of course. And in traditional iconography, when space was limited, parts of any word, including the name of the saint, could appear on separate lines. But where's the rest of the saint's name in this case? After considering various explanations, the most probable conclusion is that Marino intentionally left the saint's name incomplete, perhaps citing lack of space, or he inserted those slanted letters on his own initiative, discreetly immortalizing himself in the M-A-R lettering, suggesting not only the saint's name, but also his own name, Marino. Now, the last group of contributors to the ROM Mosaic are the De Cadli brothers, Remo, Antonio, and Olvino. They were the sons of an entrepreneur from Friuli named Giuseppe De Cadli, who ran a contracting company in Eastern Europe before coming to Canada in 1927. Giuseppe was to become the first president of the Association of Friulians in Toronto, which was founded in the very years that the ROM Mosaic was being constructed and inaugurated. 2 of the De Cadli sons, Remo and Olvino, were involved in the installation of the ROM Mosaic, as Olvino, interviewed in the 1990s, had explained. And here's a photograph of Remo working high up on a scaffold, installing the mosaic that circles the Foster Memorial Building just below the dome, the mosaic inscription. This now complete photo, taken at the official opening of the temple in October 1936, shows from left to right partners Remo De Cadli, Joseph Connolly, and Ciro Mora, along with another De Cadli family member. In the next photograph, you see Olvino on the left and Remo on the right, visiting the ROM Mosaic much later in 1962. It was the 50th anniversary of the founding of the museum. As the accompanying newspaper article from the Telegram newspaper explains, they were reminiscing about their work installing the ROM Mosaic. The journalist comments that it was a special anniversary for these entrepreneurs who almost 30 years earlier, and I quote, as new immigrants from Italy, had climbed scaffolds to begin their first major undertaking in a new land. By this time, in 1962, the 2 brothers had been owners of the Connolly Company for more than a decade. Under the De Cadli directorship, the Connolly Company was to furnish much embellishment in marble and mosaics on architectural sites, not just in the Toronto area, but in other provinces of Canada too. The height of the production in mosaics occurred in the 1960s, a period when many trained craftsmen of a younger generation who had attended the mosaic school in Spilimbergo, for example, immigrated to Canada after World War II and possessed the skills to execute first-rate artwork, such as that found in St. Anne's Anglican Church, for example. Their colleagues in the Connolly Company now included artists from other areas of Italy, the Marche, Veneto, and Basilicata. Some of the Decaglione Company craftsmen preserved photographs of the preparatory work for the company's masterpiece, the huge 1960 mosaic project at the Church of Our Lady of Sorrows on Bloor Street West. One of these photos refers back to the ROM Mosaic. It shows a group of mosaic workers with sections of the Lady of Sorrow mosaics being arranged on the floor. In the background, hanging on the wall, is what can readily be identified as a detail of the ROM Mosaic, namely the Chinese dragon. The Decadlis must have kept it in their shop, by then located farther north in the city, to remind the Connolly community of the past achievements of the company. To sum up, these are the contributors to the ROM Mosaic we celebrate this evening. Descendants of some of them I know are present and must be recognized. Neither Joseph Connolly, company owner, nor Ciro Mora, company partner and chief mosaicist, had children, and they left no direct descendants. Antonio Bortuzzo, company partner in charge of marble and terrazzo installations, has grandsons who live in Italy. For Antonio Dell'Angela, the supervising mosaicist, I believe granddaughter Sandra Bratti is present, along with many great-grandchildren and their families. And perhaps when I finish in naming all those I believe may be present, we can ask them to stand. Representing Marino Colonello, the mischievous mosaicist, as I like to call him, several grandchildren, Danny, Ronnie, and Dino, and their families are, I believe, in attendance. And finally, for the Decadli brothers, that is Remo and Olvino, who installed the ROM Mosaic and went on to become owners of the company, with brother Antonio acting as a sector manager. Those representing the families should include Arnold, son of Remo, Dennis, Janet, and Arlene, whose father was Olvino, Joseph, Dino, and Rita, children of Antonio, and grandchildren of the Decadli brothers' sister Nina, Amalia, and of course, all of their extended families. I don't know if those mentioned or part of those families would now like to stand. I would certainly prefer. To two deceased family members, Anita Decadli Baker, daughter of Remo, and Mary Mariani Decadli, wife and then widow of Olvino. They shared with me some of the key photographs you viewed this evening and provided documents essential to the reconstruction of the story of the ROM Mosaic. Soon, there'll be an opportunity for us to go upstairs to view the masterpiece that their forebears had a role in creating. But first, we might just reflect on how the ROM Mosaic of 1932-33 is, as was said before, emblematic of Italian creativity on Canadian soil. 70 years after it was prepared in 2002-2003, the Mosaic School of Spilimbergo held an exhibition here at the museum and sent instructors to demonstrate their craft on site for several months. And now in 2024, 91 years after the inauguration of the Rotunda and its mosaic, collaboration between the museum and the Italian consulate has resulted in this evening's event, recognizing in particular the mosaic craftsmen. My hope is that it will not be the last opportunity to celebrate the ROM Mosaic and Italian cultural heritage at the ROM. Thank you.
Something, a treasure of the city, and really the heritage and the legacy of what the Italian community has brought in building up the city and this museum. Now I would like to open the Q&A part of this program. If anybody has a question for Professor Zozzi Pugliese, now is the time. Yes, can we have, yes, right there.
Thank you very much, Olga, for a most informative. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much, Olga, for the most informative presentation. You have described some of the elements of that are the medallions of the mosaic. I'm intrigued by the one in the center because it's not Venetian, as I can remember. And it's perhaps much more popular in the Scandinavian Romanesque art. Would you please?
I must say I know nothing about that. Are you speaking of the design in the center where the inscription is?
That's right.
Oh, right.
The one right in the center.
Mm-hmm. I'm afraid I have no information about it. I assume that if the designer was in fact Chapman, his experience studying in Paris might have exposed him to what you're speaking about. And I know you and your wife are doing fine work studying baptismal fonts throughout the world. You have thousands of exemplars. So yeah, we can only hope that what we're doing for mosaics can certainly not equal what you're doing, but we're trying.
Thank you. We have an answer.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Hello everyone, my name is Winston Anderson. I am a docent here. That at the center of it is a Byzantine knot. It is a symbol of unity and eternity. And in the tour, we tell people that the knot, in association with the inscription, tells the story of the ceiling and of the museum. It is one of unity in diversity.
Thank you, Winston. I remember when you took us on a tour and you spoke so eloquently about the whole mosaic and all its symbols and meanings, and thanks for illuminating us today, enlightening us today.
Are there any other questions? Yes, over there. Can I ask? Over there.
Hi there. Thanks so much for the presentation. My name is Anthony Carly. I'm Romo's grandson, and you might remember in 2004, I think, I was doing some research about my grandfather. I came to your kitchen table, actually, and shared some articles with me and the work that you were doing at that time. And I recall asking you, and I'm sure you answered, but I'm forgetting in this moment the answer to the question, which is, what is the status of the Mosaic work under the Ontario Heritage Act? Is it protected? Are there reasons for designation? Does that tie in your work and your research? Is it protected, etc.? Thanks.
Perhaps the provincial minister we had present. But what I do know is that many lovely mosaic murals have simply been destroyed, painted over. They're generally disregarded. Unfortunately, mosaic art does not seem to enjoy a very high status, and when people find beautiful murals, for example, the production of pasta in a building that was originally the home of the ROM Pasta company, which didn't last very long, but was established by some prominent businessmen. Well, the current owner told me he just painted it over white. So there really is no protection that I know of. Obviously, an institution like ROM is protected as a whole institution, but mosaics as a form of art, as far as I know, enjoy no special status.
Professor, if it's not, it will be as of Monday.
Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, I would like to invite you after this wonderful presentation. I really thank Professor Olga Zazi-Pugliese to actually go and see this treasure of the ROM and enjoy a glass of wine with us. The reception is kindly offered by the Consul General of Italy, Luca Zavioli, and it's upstairs, so you have two options. You can go either up the stairs, or there's also, if I'm not mistaken, an elevator right on, as soon as you, on your right, when you get out. Thank you.
Paul Calandra, un po' in italiano e un po' in inglese.
Ok, parlo solo calabrese,
Sì,
so, allora.
perfetto, per me va benissimo.
Ok.
Prego, un'importante rieducazione di quello che è stato l'eredità di queste costruzioni.
È una cosa incredibile, veramente. Io sono 54 anni e non lo sapevo che c'era una cosa così bella che hanno fatto gli immigranti italiani. So, allora, in un momento pride, but also è un tempo per ricordo di tutte le cose che hanno fatto gli italiani, i sacrifici che hanno venuto qui in Ontario, a Canada, e veramente l'incredibile lavoro che hanno fatto. Yeah, I mean, it is just it is an absolutely beautiful example of all that Italians brought to Canada and Ontario, and more often than not, as you heard in the presentation, their hard work was sometimes forgotten. For them, it was just something that they did, but forgotten. So this is such an important day for us to remember all of their hard work. And to honor their sacrifices and what they gave to us.
Come italiano, la sua famiglia di origine ha fatto parte, appunto, ha supportato lei per diventare una rappresentante degli italiani, non solo degli italiani, ma di tutti i canadesi qui in Ontario.
Yeah, look, again, I told the story when I was speaking how my parents came here and how difficult it was for them when they first came to Canada. But they brought their tradition, they brought their skills, they brought their passion here to Canada. They sacrificed, but they also helped build an incredible country without forgetting who they were. They never forgot who they were and where they came from.
Bisogna ricordare l'Italia non soltanto per il folklore, ma anche per la cultura.
Yeah, absolutely. Veramente. It's, as I said, Italians in Ontario are known for building everything, the roads, the houses. We often forget they're also responsible for the most beautiful parts of our city, and today is a wonderful opportunity for us to reflect on that as well. We know how beautiful everything is in Italy. They brought that beauty here, and we need to do a better job of respecting and honoring that. All right, thank you.
Yeah, but only because of McDonald's name. Gianni.
Allora, console, veramente emozionante rivedere questa rievocazione, perché effettivamente sono tantissimi gli anni in cui gli italiani sono arrivati qui in Canada e hanno dato testimonianza con il loro lavoro di tutta l'arte che potevano avere qui in Canada.
Sì, direi che questa serata ha riportato alla memoria proprio esattamente questo. Gli italiani qui hanno portato non solo il lavoro, non solo una certa cultura del cibo, del vino e quant'altro, ma anche un'altra parte importante, uno di quegli aspetti italiani per cui andiamo famosi, la cultura in generale. E in particolare questa ondata di friulani ha lasciato, abbiamo sentito questa sera, una serie di capolavori in termini di mosaici e non solo mosaici un po' dovunque in Ontario, e in particolare questi mosaici del Royal Ontario Museum, che fortunatamente, come abbiamo sentito, sono rimasti protetti proprio perché dentro questa istituzione sono qui a ricordarci esattamente questa capacità, questa abilità, questo senso anche del bello, dell'estetica. Purtroppo tanti di questi capolavori sono stati nel tempo perduti, e io mi auguro che un evento come questo non solo riporti alla memoria della nostra comunità capolavori come questo, ma a tutto il resto dei cittadini, in particolare di Toronto, possa ispirare il senso della necessità di proteggere capolavori d'arte che abbelliscono e rendono più consistente proprio il multiculturalismo su cui questa provincia si basa.
Grazie.
Prego.
So he's like, I mean, he's fabulous. He knows more about.
Oh yeah, please. 2 kids over right. Yeah, we met when Gianni, you were away, and they gave you with your mom. Yeah, we had a nice conversation. Very good. There'll be more occasions. Yeah, I hope.
Vabbè, stilarsi che
Speriamo.
sono occupate.
Sì, bene,
Grazie
ciao
mille.
Gianni, ciao. Sì. Hai fatto rifornimento dai tuoi prodotti?
Così che mi è succeduto anche con il nero, poi adesso mi ha mangiato. Mo sì, un pochino. Spero che vada bene.
Professoressa, grazie per questa sua illustrazione, perché per noi molti non eravamo a conoscenza di questa arte qui in Canada. Quanta importanza ci ha fatto capire che è molto importante poter preservare queste opere d'arte.
Certo. Beh, diciamo, l'arte musiva è una forma d'arte che spesso qui non viene presa in considerazione, purtroppo. Ci sono opere, finora ne ho individuate circa 200 in tutto il Canada. ovviamente andrebbero riconosciute, non distrutte, no? Quando l'edificio viene magari rifatto.
L'Italia ha tantissimi capolavori che rimangono eterni.
Certo.
Bisognerebbe pensare anche qui in Canada che il modo di costruire diventi un'opera d'arte nel tempo.
E infatti bisognerebbe fare così, ma almeno se facciamo conoscere meglio i nomi degli artigiani, dei mosaicisti, c'è più probabilità che qualcuno se ne occupi. Come diceva Anthony De Carli prima, bisognerebbe riconoscere l'importanza di quella forma artistica e magari, ecco, avere una protezione ufficiale da parte dei governi. Sì.
Ecco, le famiglie Furlane hanno dato un'impronta particolare a questo Canada.
Negli anni 30 hanno fondato la loro associazione che continua fino ad oggi e forse si sono distinti un po' anche in una certa tendenza politica nei primi anni, ma ovviamente dopo la seconda guerra mondiale sono arrivati qui italiani da altre regioni che hanno fatto altrettanto. Quindi io direi che sono stati forse fra i primi e quindi si riconosce il loro contributo, sì, in quel senso.
E dovremmo fare in modo appunto che questi appuntamenti non rimangano appuntamenti elitari, ma questo tipo possa essere condiviso con tante più persone.
È in programma un articolo che verrà pubblicato sulla rivista del museo, quindi quella sarà una forma di diffusione maggiore. Finora, per esempio, io ho pubblicato 2 articoli su questo mosaico in particolare, ma si trovano quegli articoli su riviste ecco, appunto.
Perché altrimenti l'Italia è conosciuta più per il folklore e non per quello che è la cultura italiana.
Certo.
E quindi bisognerà adoperarci per questo.
Infatti.
Comunque grazie e complimenti per i suoi studi.
Grazie.
Ci sono delle famiglie
sì, io non li conosco, saranno saliti.
And I'd like your nobility to maybe try to carry forward some of your ideas and whether maybe this works out with the university to help you to return some of that sense into the museum.
Your voice sounded so familiar, I didn't know who the heck he was because I confused it with somebody else's voice. But there you go.
Rock Hudson.
Io non so come per essere, questo che